On July 11, 2024, YouTuber Lethal Lure uploaded a fishing video that began with all the relaxed confidence of a typical day on the water. He was out alone on his local lake, casting topwater baits into the wind and chop, determined to prove to his audience that real skill could still produce quality fish even when conditions were far from perfect. The early hours felt promising and almost routine, explosive strikes sending water flying, fish breaking the surface in dramatic, thrashing splashes, and the satisfying heavy thump of solid catches coming over the side of the boat. The sun was bright, the boat rocked gently with the rhythm of the waves, and everything carried that classic, satisfying vibe of a good day spent doing what he loved. The camera captured every cast, every fight, and every triumphant moment as he talked excitedly about technique and persistence. But nature had been quietly preparing something far more dramatic. Within minutes, the sky began to transform in a way that felt almost supernatural in its speed. What had been scattered, harmless clouds rapidly thickened and darkened into a heavy, menacing blanket of deep gray that swallowed the sunlight completely. The wind, which had been steady and predictable from one consistent direction, suddenly reversed course with shocking violence, whipping across the open lake and turning the once manageable surface into a chaotic mess of white-capped waves that slammed against the hull with growing fury. The water that had been relatively calm only moments earlier now churned and boiled as if angry. Then, cutting through the rising noise of wind and waves, came the unmistakable piercing tone of his phone delivering an emergency alert. Tornado warning in effect for the exact area where he was floating. In a heartbeat, the entire purpose of the video changed from lighthearted fishing content to a raw, desperate battle for survival. Lethal Lure's voice, which had been calm, instructional, and even playful earlier, instantly tightened with real urgency and a hint of disbelief. "Oh no, yeah, we should get going," he said quickly, already spinning the boat around and pointing it toward the distant shoreline. "Tornado warning. Let's not mess with this at all. Let's get going right now." He tried to keep his commentary light for the viewers at home, cracking a nervous joke here and there, but the fear creeping into his tone was impossible to hide. The sky continued to darken at an alarming, almost unnatural speed, turning day into something that felt like twilight in the middle of the afternoon. A massive, solid wall of rain appeared on the horizon like a moving gray curtain racing straight toward his small boat with terrifying speed. The wind howled louder and louder, shifting direction again and again without warning, creating waves that rocked the boat so violently that he had to brace himself constantly even though they were still in relatively shallow water, barely a few feet deep in many places. "This is about to get not pleasant really freaking quick, dude," he narrated, his grip on the wheel turning his knuckles white as spray flew over the bow. The rain began hammering down in thick, blinding sheets that reduced visibility to almost nothing, turning the lake into a chaotic blur of gray. The touchscreen on his phone became nearly unusable, slick with water and constantly registering false inputs from the wind and rain. Yet the tornado warning alert kept screaming from the speaker. "I mean, I hope you guys can see this on camera. That is a full emergency weather service alert." He fought desperately to keep the boat pointed toward the faint, barely visible outline of the bridge he could just make out through the driving rain and spray. "We are actually running for our lives in this right now." The wind was blowing in the exact opposite direction just a few minutes ago. Waves started crashing over the bow with real force, soaking him to the skin and making the deck slippery and dangerous. The boat pitched and rolled so hard that he could feel every heavy impact vibrating through the hull and up into his body. "We're so close to the bank, but we can't even see it anymore through all this." Every single second stretched out into an eternity filled with tension, adrenaline, and the constant roar of wind and rain. The rain stung his face like needles, the wind screamed in his ears, and the terrifying mental image of a possible waterspout forming somewhere right behind him kept flashing through his mind as he pushed the throttle harder. Somehow, through a combination of raw determination, quick reflexes, years of experience on the water, and perhaps a little bit of pure luck, he managed to reach the dock and tie off the boat just seconds before the full fury of the storm slammed into the entire area with devastating power. The footage ends with him standing on solid ground at last, completely drenched, breathing hard, and staring back at the lake that had transformed from a peaceful fishing spot into a raging, uncontrollable monster in under 10 minutes. Watching that weather change so violently and so quickly is genuinely terrifying on a deep level. One moment you are completely focused on your next cast and the thrill of the bite. The next you are racing against a tornado across open water in a small boat with almost no real protection. It stands as a powerful, sobering reminder that when you are out there alone on the water, nature does not send gentle second warnings or give you time to think. It simply arrives with overwhelming force and demands your full attention. The second story delivers equal parts heart-pounding tension and wildly entertaining chaos. Captain Matt Budd, a YouTuber well known for chasing the absolute biggest sea monsters, took his good friend Monster Mike out specifically to target a Goliath grouper, one of the most powerful, stubborn, and legendary fish in the entire ocean. These creatures can easily reach hundreds of pounds and put up fights that feel like arm wrestling a living freight train. After a long, exhausting, and incredibly intense battle that tested both men to their limits, they finally managed to bring an absolute beast alongside the boat. A true giant that easily weighed between 450 and 500 pounds of pure muscle, fury, and raw power. Mike was absolutely ecstatic, screaming with pure adrenaline and joy. "That is my personal best fish ever. Look at the size of this thing." The two friends high-fived, laughed, and celebrated what should have been the perfect, triumphant ending to an already epic day on the water. But then Mike made one impulsive decision that instantly flipped the entire video from glorious victory to a near disaster that could have ended in tragedy. He wanted the ultimate, eye-catching thumbnail photo for the video. So without thinking twice, he jumped straight into the water with the still thrashing massive grouper. "You're good, bro. You're floating. Just hold on to the fish and smile for the camera," Matt shouted, trying to keep the mood fun and lighthearted. Mike splashed in with a big grin at first, clutching the enormous fish proudly for the shot. For a brief, hilarious second, everything looked cool, ridiculous, and perfect for content. Then the giant grouper suddenly exploded with violent energy. It thrashed with unbelievable power, whipping its enormous body and tail and dragging Mike completely off balance in an instant. Before anyone could react, he was pulled underwater, choking and flailing wildly. The terrifying reality hit everyone watching like a hammer. Mike couldn't swim at all. Panic erupted in his voice the moment he managed to surface for air. He screamed at the top of his lungs in raw terror. "Help! Help! Get me up! Get me up, bro!" The fish kept pulling him under again and again, its sheer size and strength turning the water around the boat into a chaotic, dangerous battlefield. Mike's arms flailed desperately in every direction, his head disappearing beneath the waves repeatedly while he gasped for air and begged to be saved. Matt and the rest of the crew reacted with lightning speed, lunging over the side, grabbing anything they could reach, and hauling with every ounce of strength they had. For a few heart-stopping, agonizing seconds, it genuinely looked like the giant grouper might actually win the struggle and drag Mike down for good. His screams grew more desperate and hoarse, all earlier excitement replaced by pure, unfiltered fear. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they managed to drag him back over the gunwale and onto the boat, coughing violently, shaking from head to toe and dripping wet. The very first words that came out of his mouth, once he could breathe again, were, "I don't want to go saltwater fishing anymore." The entire sequence is one of those incredibly rare moments where a perfect fishing victory nearly turned into a real-life tragedy in just a few terrifying seconds. Mike is incredibly lucky that his friends reacted so fast. A few seconds longer underwater and the story could have ended in a completely different, much darker way. On June 18, 2022, YouTuber Fishing with Tate and his group of friends headed out for what they fully expected to be a relaxed, fun-filled afternoon fishing along a local creek. The sun was shining brightly, the water looked clear and inviting, and the whole group was laughing, joking around, and casting their lines with carefree energy. But they couldn't completely shake the memory of a previous visit to the same spot when a strange, unpredictable man had suddenly appeared carrying a large machete. He had been aggressively hacking at brush and undergrowth while warning them in a hostile tone to make sure they cleaned up every piece of their trash. They had managed to talk to him later that day and he had eventually calmed down. But the uneasy feeling from that first encounter had never fully disappeared. As the group worked their way deeper into the winding creek, they began spotting the same man again, watching them silently from a distance and moving quietly through the trees and underbrush. Eventually, they decided it would be best to approach him directly and try to clear the air once and for all. What followed was one of the most bizarre, rambling, confusing, and genuinely unsettling conversations ever captured on a fishing camera. The man started talking almost immediately and without any real filter, launching into a long, disjointed story about a lost ancient city supposedly hidden somewhere along the creek, a place he claimed was far older than the Roman Empire itself. He spoke in broken, constantly shifting sentences about mysterious carvings in the rocks that he insisted had his name on it, about secret walls deep in the water, hidden treasures, and all kinds of things that were a lot more than you know. His tone swung wildly and unpredictably from almost friendly to deeply paranoid, defensive, and occasionally aggressive. One moment he was telling them they could fish freely wherever they wanted. The next he was warning them sternly not to go any farther downstream under any circumstances. Tate and his friends did everything they could to stay calm, polite, and non-confrontational. They repeatedly assured the man that they were only there to fish, had absolutely no interest in taking or disturbing anything, and would leave the entire area cleaner than they found it. But the man's behavior grew steadily more erratic as the conversation continued. He gestured wildly with his hands, repeated himself over and over, and clearly wasn't thinking straight. Tate later admitted straight to the camera that the guy was tweaking hard, and that this was definitely the same person who had been openly carrying the machete just a few days earlier. The tension hanging in the air was thick enough to feel. Every single person could sense that the situation could escalate into something dangerous in the blink of an eye. The man kept insisting they stay away from the lower part of the creek, claiming he lived right there and had discovered something extremely important a long time ago. His body language remained unpredictable and unstable, and the memory that he had previously been armed made every passing second feel loaded with potential risk. In the end, the group managed to back away carefully and without anything turning physical or violent. They continued fishing a short distance upstream, but the relaxed mood from earlier had completely vanished. Later, as they were packing up their gear and getting ready to leave, they noticed a wildlife officer driving past on the nearby road. They made the responsible and thoughtful decision to quietly inform the officer about the unstable man with the machete. Tate explained on camera that he fishes this particular spot quite often and sometimes even brings his young daughter along. The thought of someone erratic, unpredictable, and potentially armed being around children or other innocent people was simply too much to ignore. They left the creek safely that day, but the entire encounter lingered in their minds for a long time afterward. It serves as a chilling, unforgettable reminder that sometimes the biggest and most serious threat while out fishing has nothing at all to do with the fish swimming in the water. It is the unpredictable people you can unexpectedly encounter along the banks. The final story took place on October 21, 2023, when YouTuber Scott Fish and his friends were fishing peacefully in a local bay and suddenly hooked something truly enormous. A huge, powerful stingray. Excited but immediately cautious because they knew how dangerous these creatures could be, they began carefully and methodically reeling it in, staying well aware of the sharp, venomous barbs that could cause serious injury. Everything was proceeding smoothly and under control until, completely out of nowhere, a random woman appeared and waded straight into the shallow water, forcefully inserting herself into the middle of the situation without any invitation. She immediately started barking orders at the group, demanding that they cut the line right away and repeatedly warning them about the stingray's dangerous barb as if they were complete beginners. The guys were left confused, increasingly frustrated, and honestly a little stunned. They knew exactly what they were doing, had plenty of experience, and were handling the fish as safely and professionally as possible. But the woman refused to stay back at a safe, reasonable distance. Instead, she positioned herself dangerously close to the stressed, thrashing ray, even reaching toward the heavy line while loudly claiming that she was a marine biologist and that the anglers had no real idea what they were dealing with. At one point, she casually asked if she could take a picture with the stingray, completely ignoring the very real and immediate risk she was creating for herself and everyone else involved in the moment. The anglers kept pleading with her urgently to move away to a safer spot, calmly explaining that the heavy braid could snap at any second or that the powerful ray could strike with its barb in a split second of panic. The woman's behavior grew more and more ridiculous and confrontational as the minutes passed, arguing back, touching the line anyway despite the warnings, and refusing to listen to basic common sense. The tension rose sharply as the ray continued to thrash and send splashes flying everywhere. Scott and his friends were working as quickly and safely as they could while simultaneously trying to manage this unpredictable stranger who seemed determined to put herself, and potentially them, in real harm's way. In the end, they successfully managed to remove the hook, take a few quick photos for the memory, and release the healthy stingray back into the bay where it belonged. The woman eventually walked away after a heated exchange, still muttering comments about safety and expertise. Scott and his friends were left standing there shaking their heads in complete disbelief. They later reflected honestly that what the woman had done was not bravery at all. It was reckless gambling with something that could have caused serious injury or even worse in the blink of an eye. Stepping that close to a large, hooked, and highly agitated stingray is never a smart or safe idea, no matter how much knowledge someone claims to have about marine life. Taken together, these 4 fishing videos create a vivid, unforgettable picture of just how quickly and dramatically things can spiral out of control when you are out on the water. Whether it is a sudden and violent storm that turns a peaceful lake into a deadly battlefield in minutes, a monster fish that nearly drowns a friend who cannot swim, an unstable stranger armed with a machete lurking along a quiet creek, or a reckless person who ignores every single safety rule while standing right next to a dangerous animal, the wild has a powerful way of reminding us that we are never truly in complete control. The next time you head out with your rod and reel, keep these stories fresh in your mind, because the biggest catch of the day might not be the fish on the end of your line at all. Stay alert, stay respectful of nature, stay safe, and never, ever underestimate how fast a perfect day on the water can turn into something you will remember for the rest of your life.